Hey friends, tonight we're time traveling to a place even more exhausting than your last family reunion, ancient Egypt, right in the middle of the world's least fun construction project. That's right, tonight we're talking about what it was really like to be an Israelite slave building the pyramids. Not the glamorous National Geographic version with sweeping orchestral music and mysterious hieroglyphs. No. This is the real deal. Sunburned, sand in your teeth. Why does everything smell like onions? Egypt. So before you collapse from sheer historical empathy, take a second to like this video and subscribe. But only if you're actually a believer in bedtime stories, biblical comedy, or the healing power of a good nap. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and if you've ever tried to build anything more complicated than IKEA furniture. Spoiler: the Israelites didn't get an Allen wrench. Now dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soothing ancient breeze effect, and get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet in, just in case a plague of frogs decides to make a cameo. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to wake up as an Israelite slave in Egypt? Did they have a word for Monday blues? Or was every day just a Monday? How do you keep your dignity when your boss is a guy in a gold hat who thinks he's a god? What did they eat for breakfast? Sandwiches or just sand? Could you survive a day hauling bricks in 110-degree heat? Or would you fake a locust allergy and call in sick? And what was the ancient Egyptian equivalent of, "I need to speak to your manager"? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1300 BC in the shadow of the pyramids. You have no shoes, your back hurts, and you're already late for your shift. Good luck. You open your eyes to the gentle sound of a taskmaster screaming at you from across the mud brick hut. There's no snooze button, just the distant thud of bricks and the unmistakable aroma of communal body odor. Welcome to another day in the world's least relaxing timeshare. Let's set the scene. You're lying on a mat that's basically a flattened pile of reeds, generously stuffed with yesterday's regrets and a few bonus splinters. The air is thick, partly with dust, partly with the scent of 100 unwashed feet, and partly with the existential dread of knowing you're about to spend the next 12 hours moving rocks for a guy who thinks eyeliner is a personality trait. Your bedroom is a communal hut, which is a fancy way of saying you share your sleeping space with 12 other people, 3 goats, and a mouse who's somehow more respected than you are. The first thing you notice, besides the yelling, is the light. Not the soft golden glow of a sunrise, but the harsh, blinding slap of Egyptian daylight, squeezing through every crack in the wall. It's like God himself is shining a flashlight directly into your eyeballs, just to make sure you don't oversleep. There's no curtain to pull, no blackout shades, just a ragged piece of linen that's seen better centuries. You try to stretch, but your back immediately reminds you that you spent yesterday hauling bricks the size of small refrigerators. Every joint pops like a bowl of ancient Rice Krispies. You consider faking an injury, but you remember what happened to the last guy who tried that. He got promoted to official dung collector, which is somehow a demotion. The taskmaster's voice grows louder, echoing off the mud walls with the subtlety of a marching band. "Up, up! Pharaoh's pyramid won't build itself," he shouts, as if you'd forgotten. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone has ever invented coffee, or if the closest thing you'll get is a sip of lukewarm barley water that tastes suspiciously like disappointment. You glance around the hut. Your fellow Israelites are already stirring, rubbing sleep from their eyes and muttering curses that would make a camel blush. Someone's lost a sandal. Someone else is arguing with a goat over who gets the last bite of last night's onion. creates a scene that makes your family's Thanksgiving look organized. You shuffle to your feet, feeling every grain of sand between your toes. There's no time for a morning routine. No brushing your teeth, no hot shower, not even a cold one. If you're lucky, you might splash your face with a handful of water from a communal jug, which is basically a petri dish with a handle. You try not to think about what's floating in it. Outside, the world is already awake. The sounds of construction drift on the wind, hammers shouting, the distant groan of a donkey who's also reconsidering his life choices. The sun is barely up, but it's already hot enough to fry an egg on your forehead. You take a deep breath, cough, and immediately regret it. As you shuffle toward the worksite, you realize that in ancient Egypt, the only thing more reliable than the sunrise is the certainty that you'll be yelled at before breakfast. It's not exactly a motivational poster, but it does get you moving. And so, another day begins. One brick, one blister, and one sarcastic prayer at a time. Breakfast is served, a bowl of lukewarm onion gruel, garnished with a sprinkle of despair. You eye your meal and wonder if anyone in history has ever invented seasoning. Spoiler, not yet. You sit cross-legged on the packed dirt floor, clutching a chipped clay bowl that's seen more drama than a Real Housewives reunion. The contents slosh gently, a pale greyish mush with the consistency of wallpaper paste and the aroma of, well, onions. Always onions. If you ever meet someone who claims to have invented the onion, you're going to have words with them. Strong, tearful words. The communal breakfast scene is a masterclass in low expectations. Around you, your fellow Israelites are hunched over their own bowls, shoveling in mouthfuls with the resigned efficiency of people who know this is as good as it gets. Conversation is minimal, mostly grunts, sighs, and the occasional existential groan. Someone tries to lighten the mood by making a joke about onion surprise. But the only surprise is that there's still no bread. You take your first bite. The texture is somewhere between lumpy oatmeal and regret. The flavor? Imagine if sadness had a taste, and that taste was onion. You chew slowly, trying to convince yourself that this is fuel for greatness, or at least fuel for not passing out before noon. You briefly fantasize about a world with cinnamon, honey, or literally anything that isn't onion. But here in Pharaoh's Egypt, the spice rack is just a shelf with more onions. As you eat, you glance at the side dishes. There aren't any. If you're lucky, someone might have found a stray garlic clove or a wilted leek. But mostly, it's just more onion, maybe with a hint of yesterday's dust. You wonder if the Egyptians are secretly running a social experiment to see how many onions a person can eat before they start sweating vinaigrette. The meal is communal, which means you're also sharing germs, complaints, and the occasional unsolicited life advice from the oldest guy in the hut. He claims he remembers a time when breakfast included figs and dates, but you're pretty sure he's just trying to keep hope alive. Or maybe he's delirious from all the onions. You look around and realize that, in a weird way, this breakfast is a bonding experience. Nothing brings people together like mutual suffering and the shared knowledge that things could always be worse. At least you're not eating locusts. Yet. You finish your bowl, scraping the last bits of gruel with a finger and licking it clean. There's no such thing as leftovers here. Every calorie counts when you're about to spend the day hauling bricks under the Egyptian sun. You set your bowl aside, stomach rumbling in protest, and try to ignore the fact that you'll be tasting onions for the next 12 hours, no matter what you do. As you stand up and stretch, you can't help but wonder, did Pharaoh ever eat onion porridge? Or is he up there in his palace feasting on roast duck and laughing at the idea of breakfast that bites back? You make a mental note to ask Moses about it, if he ever shows up with that whole freedom thing. For now, you wipe your mouth, sigh, and prepare to face the day, powered by onions, disappointment, and just enough hope to keep going. Your outfit of the day is a single, scratchy linen tunic. One size fits none. There's no such thing as casual Friday, when every day is survive the Sunday. Let's talk about ancient Israelite fashion, which is less runway chic and more run away from chafing. You reach for your tunic, which is technically clean if you ignore the stains, the smell, and the fact that it's been worn by 3 generations before you. The linen is rough, woven with love, sweat, and just a hint of despair. It's the kind of fabric that exfoliates your skin, whether you want it to or not. Forget about athleisure. This is athleisurely suffering. You slip the tunic over your head, and it immediately clings to your body in all the wrong places. It's baggy, where you wish it was fitted, and tight, where you wish it was loose. There's no such thing as tailored fit, unless you count the patch your aunt sewed on after last week's run-in with a particularly aggressive goat. The colour? Somewhere between ancient oatmeal and sun-bleached surrender. If you're feeling fancy, you might tie a rope around your waist. But let's be honest, it's less of a belt and more of a suggestion. Shoes. If you're lucky, you have sandals. 2 slabs of leather held together by optimism and a prayer. Most days, though, you just go barefoot, which is great for building character and even better for collecting splinters. You wiggle your toes and try not to think about what you're stepping in. Ancient Egypt is basically one big litter box, and you're the cat. Accessories? Oh, you mean the luxury of a headscarf to keep the sun off your scalp. It's less of a fashion statement and more of a desperate attempt to avoid third-degree burns. Sunglasses haven't been invented yet, so you squint heroically into the blinding light, looking like someone who's just realized their entire life is a group project they can't drop. There's no mirror, but if there were, you'd see a person who looks like they've just survived a tornado made of onions and regret. You try to smooth your hair, but it's a lost cause. The humidity has turned it into a tribute to Moses' beard, frizzy, wild, and full of secrets. You briefly consider starting a new trend, Bedouin chic, but you know the only thing anyone cares about is whether you'll make it through the day without passing out. You glance at your fellow Israelites, all dressed in the same uniform of misery. There's a certain camaraderie in shared suffering. Nothing brings people together like matching sweat stains. You exchange a knowing look with your neighbor, silently agreeing that if anyone ever invents pajamas, you'll never take them off. As you step outside, the sun hits you like a judgment. Your tunic immediately starts sticking to your skin, and you wonder if anyone in history has ever invented deodorant. Spoiler, not for another 3,000 years. You sigh, adjust your rope belt, and prepare to face the day, fashionably oppressed, but at least not naked. Because in ancient Egypt, that's about as good as it gets. You shuffle out the door and into a sea of sand. Your commute is a brisk walk to the construction site, dodging camel droppings and the occasional runaway goat. Forget traffic jams. Here, the only jam is your foot in a sandal that's falling apart. Let's talk about the ancient Egyptian commute, a daily journey that makes modern rush hour look like a spa day. There are no chariots for you, no Uber camels, not even a donkey with a sense of direction. It's just you, your 2 feet, and a landscape that's basically one giant litter box. The sand gets everywhere, in your shoes, in your ears, and in places you didn't even know you had. You start to wonder if sand is actually a food group, considering how much you accidentally ingest before breakfast. The sun is already flexing its muscles, rising over the horizon like it's got something to prove. You squint against the glare, wishing for sunglasses, or at least a hat that doesn't double as a sweat sponge. The air is dry, the wind is hot, and every step is a reminder that you're living in history's longest episode of Survivor Sahara Edition. You pass your neighbors, all shuffling in the same direction, heads down, faces set in that universal expression of, "I'd rather be anywhere else." There's Miriam, still picking straw out of her hair from yesterday's brick-making marathon. There's old Reuben, who claims he once saw a fish in the Nile this big, but nobody believes him. And there's the local goat, who seems to be on a personal mission to trip as many people as possible before sunrise. The ground is uneven, littered with rocks, thorns, and the aforementioned camel droppings. You try to avoid them, but your sandal, crafted from only the finest, cheapest reeds, has other ideas. It flops, it flaps, and then, inevitably, it catches on a rock and sends you stumbling. You regain your balance with the grace of a startled ostrich, pretending nothing happened, even though everyone saw. There's no small talk on this commute. No one's asking about your weekend plans, or if you caught the latest episode of Plagues and Miracles. The only conversation is the occasional muttered complaint about Pharaoh's brick quota, or a heated debate over whether onions count as a vegetable or a punishment. As you walk, the construction site looms in the distance, a jagged silhouette against the blazing sky. The half-built pyramid is both a monument to human achievement and a daily reminder that you're not getting out of this anytime soon. You can already hear the shouts of the overseers, the clang of stone on stone, and the distant wail of someone who's just realized they left their lunch behind. By the time you arrive, your feet are already tired, your mouth is full of sand, and your sandal is hanging on by a single heroic thread. You take a deep breath, cough up a little more dust, and prepare yourself for another day of ancient Egyptian team building. Because here, the only thing more certain than the sunrise is that your commute will never, ever get easier. There's no clock to punch, just a foreman with a stick and a suspiciously good aim. You line up, try to look busy, and pray today isn't the day you get volunteered for extra brick duty. Let's talk about the ancient Egyptian workday, where the only thing more reliable than the sunrise is the sound of a whip cracking in the morning air. Forget about swiping a badge or logging into a timesheet app. Here, your attendance is recorded by the volume of your groaning and the speed at which you shuffle into line. The foreman, a man whose hobbies include yelling and perfecting his disappointed dad glare, paces up and down the row, stick in hand, looking for someone to make an example of. You do your best impression of someone who's already hard at work, which mostly involves staring intently at a pile of mud and hoping he doesn't notice you blinking. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your fellow Israelites, all of you united by a single unspoken goal. Avoid eye contact with the foreman at all costs. It's a delicate dance. Look too eager, and you'll get picked for the worst jobs. Look too tired, and you'll get picked for the worst jobs. It's a lose-lose situation, like being asked to choose between a root canal and a tax audit. The roll call is less about names and more about counting heads and making sure nobody's tried to sneak off for a nap behind the brick pile. The foreman barks out numbers, and you all grunt in response, hoping your voice doesn't crack and draw attention. You hear the familiar sound of someone getting a motivational tap on the back. Ancient Egypt's version of a performance review, There's no union, no HR department, and definitely no coffee break. If you're late, you don't get written up, you get written off. The penalty for tardiness is usually an extra shift, or, if the foreman's feeling creative, a new job title like Chief Dung Transporter. You make a mental note to never, ever be late, even if it means skipping breakfast, which, let's be honest, isn't much of a sacrifice. As the line shuffles forward, you catch a glimpse of the pyramids looming in the distance, their massive stones stacked higher than your hopes for a day off. The foreman points at you and two others. You, brick duty. You, mortar mixing. You, haul water. You nod, trying to look grateful, even though you know that brick duty is just ancient Egyptian for enjoy your blisters. You grab your tools, a wooden trowel, a basket for carrying mud, and a sense of impending doom, and head to your assigned spot. The worksite is already buzzing with activity. Men hauling, women mixing, children running errands, and everyone pretending not to notice the foreman's gaze. You take a deep breath, which immediately fills your lungs with dust and regret, and get to work. As you start your shift, you can't help but marvel at the efficiency of a system where fear is the primary motivator. It's not exactly employee of the month material, but it does keep things moving. You glance at the sun, already climbing in the sky, and wonder if anyone in history has ever invented the concept of calling in sick. Spoiler: not until the invention of the common cold and a convincing fake cough. So you keep your head down, your hands busy, and your prayers short. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, the only thing worse than being late is being noticed. Your job? Making bricks, lots of bricks. You mix mud and straw with your bare hands, wondering if this is what a spa day in hell feels like. The only exfoliation here is accidental. Let's get our hands dirty, literally. The ancient Egyptian brick-making process is less artisan craftsmanship and more group punishment with bonus blisters. You trudge over to the mud pits, where the air is thick with the scent of wet earth, sweat, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, Pharaoh will call in sick today. Spoiler, he won't. The recipe is simple. Take 1 part Nile mud, 1 part straw, and 1 part existential crisis. Mix vigorously with your hands until your fingernails are unrecognizable and your cuticles file for divorce. The mud is cold and squishy at first, but after about 5 minutes under the Egyptian sun, it turns into a sticky, gluey mess that clings to your skin like a toddler with separation anxiety. The straw is supposed to make the brick stronger, but mostly it just makes your hands itch and your allergies flare up. If you've ever tried to floss with hay, you'll understand the struggle. You knead the mixture, squishing it between your fingers and trying not to think about what else might be lurking in the mud. The Nile is not exactly known for its cleanliness. There's a non-zero chance you're sharing your workspace with a frog, a leech, or something that used to be a fish. Every so often, someone yelps and jumps back, and you know another bonus creature has made an appearance. It's like a surprise party, but the only gift is trauma. Once the mud and straw are thoroughly combined, you slap the mixture into wooden molds. The goal is to make each brick the same size, but after a few hours, your standards slip. Some bricks are chunky, some are skinny, and some look like they've already given up. You line them up in the sun to dry, hoping the wind doesn't blow them over, or that a goat doesn't decide to nap on your hard work. Quality control is mostly just don't let the foreman see. The process is repetitive, backbreaking, and somehow both too wet and too dry at the same time. Your arms ache, your back screams, and your hands are now a permanent shade of Nile brown. You try to distract yourself by humming a tune or making up new lyrics to old psalms. The Lord is my shepherd, but today I wish he was my chiropractor. Every so often, the overseer strolls by, whip in hand, offering helpful feedback like faster or more bricks. You nod, smile, and resist the urge to throw a brick in his general direction. You remind yourself that patience is a virtue, and so is not getting assigned to dung duty. By midday, you've lost count of how many bricks you've made. Your hands are pruny, your arms are jelly, and your soul is somewhere between mildly annoyed and full existential meltdown. You look around at your fellow Israelites, all equally caked in mud and regret, and realize that misery really does love company. As you slap another lump of mud into a mold, you can't help but wonder, will anyone in the future appreciate the craftsmanship of these bricks, or will they just complain about the lack of indoor plumbing? Either way, you keep working, one brick, one blister, and one sarcastic prayer at a time. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, the only thing more certain than the sun is that there will always be more bricks. You and 1,000 of your closest, sweatiest friends are stacking bricks in the blazing sun. There's no blueprint, just a guy yelling, "Higher," and a vague sense that OSHA hasn't been invented yet. Let's be honest, if you've ever suffered through a group project where nobody knows what's going on, multiply that by 1,000, add heat stroke, and you're halfway to understanding pyramid construction. The only team-building exercise here is not dropping a 2-ton stone on your co-worker's foot. You look around and realize that, in ancient Egypt, the phrase "many hands make light work" is just a cruel joke. Many hands make for more yelling, more sweating, and more opportunities to get blamed for something you definitely didn't do. The worksite is chaos. There's no whiteboard, no PowerPoint, just a foreman with a stick and a voice that could shatter pottery. He's got 2 instructions, faster and higher, neither of which are helpful when you're trying to figure out which end of the brick goes up. You try to ask for clarification, but the only answer you get is a glare and a reminder that Pharaoh's watching. Somewhere, you're pretty sure there's a guy in a gold hat sipping wine and congratulating himself on his vision. The sun is relentless, beating down on your back like it's personally offended by your existence. Sweat pours off you in rivers, mixing with the dust, until you're basically a walking mud sculpture. You try to wipe your brow, but your hands are coated in grime, so now you've just got a streak of ancient dirt across your face. You look around and realize everyone else is in the same state, filthy, exhausted, and one bad day away from inventing sarcasm. Communication is, let's call it, creative. There are hand signals, shouts, and the occasional interpretive dance when someone drops a brick on their toe. You're supposed to work in sync, but half the team is still figuring out left from right, and the other half is just trying not to pass out. You wonder if anyone has ever tried to unionize, but you suspect the answer involves more whips than negotiation. Lunch breaks are short, and the only perk is a patch of shade that disappears faster than your will to live. You eat quickly, eyeing the pyramid, and wondering if anyone will notice if you sneak off for a nap behind a pile of limestone. Spoiler, they will. The foreman has eyes like a hawk, and the patience of a caffeinated squirrel. As the day drags on, the bricks get heavier, the sun gets hotter, and the yelling gets louder. You start to fantasize about a world with cranes, pulleys, or at least a decent HR department. But here, the only benefit package is not getting trampled by an ox. By sunset, you're covered in dust, sweat, and a sense of accomplishment so faint you're not sure it's real. You look at the pyramid, still nowhere near finished. and realize you'll be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, the only thing more eternal than the pyramids is the feeling that this team project will never, ever end. You're thirsty. The water is warm, tastes like yesterday's goat, and comes in a jug that hasn't been washed since the last plague. You drink anyway, because dehydration is the only thing worse than the taste. Let's talk about hydration in ancient Egypt, a daily challenge that makes you long for the days when your biggest worry was whether your office water cooler had enough ice. Here, the cooler is a battered clay jug, passed around like a sacred relic, except nobody's praying for miracles, just for fewer floaties. The jug is heavy, awkward, and somehow always sticky. You suspect it's been through more plagues than Moses himself. You eye the water with suspicion. It's not clear, not cold, and definitely not bottled at the source. It's more of a beige, with mysterious bits swirling around like ancient sea monkeys. The flavor profile is barnyard chic, with top notes of Nile silt, and a lingering aftertaste of maybe that was a bug. You try not to think about it. After all, you've already eaten onion porridge for breakfast. Your standards are at rock bottom. You take a cautious sip, bracing yourself for the inevitable. The water is warm, almost comforting if you pretend it's soup and not a bacterial cocktail. You swallow quickly, trying not to let it linger on your tongue. Around you, your fellow workers do the same, faces contorting in a silent, shared grimace. It's a bonding experience, like surviving a bad group project or a family road trip with no bathroom breaks. There's no such thing as a personal water bottle. The jug is communal, which means you're sharing germs, backwash, and the faint hope that someone, somewhere, will invent the concept of filtered. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, ignoring the urge to gargle with sand just to get the taste out. The overseers don't care if you're thirsty. Their hydration strategy is simple. Drink fast, work faster. If you linger too long, you'll get a friendly reminder in the form of a glare, or, if you're really unlucky, a motivational poke with a stick. You quickly pass the jug to the next person, who eyes it like it's a dare. As the day heats up, the water gets even warmer, taking on the delightful flavor of sun-baked clay. You start to fantasize about cold drinks, ice water, lemonade, anything that doesn't taste like it's been filtered through a camel. You wonder if Pharaoh has a secret stash of grape juice in his palace, or if he's just as thirsty as the rest of you. Spoiler, he's not. By midday, your mouth is dry, your lips are cracked, and you're sweating out more water than you're taking in. You start to understand why the Israelites were always complaining in the desert. At this point, you trade your last onion for a single ice cube, but you keep drinking, because the only thing worse than the taste is the alternative. Dehydration in ancient Egypt isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. You've seen what happens to people who don't drink enough. They start seeing mirages, talking to rocks, and worst of all, getting assigned to dung duty. So you take another sip, grimace, and carry on. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, hydration is less about quenching your thirst and more about surviving another day. One warm, goat-flavored gulp at a time. Lunch is a communal affair. A pot of something that might be lentils, might be disappointment. You eat quickly, swapping rumors about Pharaoh's latest mood swings and whether anyone's escaped lately. Let's set the scene. You and your fellow brickmakers huddle in the narrow strip of shade cast by a half-built wall, clutching battered bowls and wooden spoons that have seen more action than Pharaoh's chariot. The midday sun is relentless, so you're grateful for any excuse to sit, even if it means risking a splinter in your backside and a mouthful of whatever's bubbling in the communal pot. The stew is ambiguous. It's brownish, lumpy, and smells faintly of onions, which is the ancient Egyptian equivalent of chef's choice. You poke at it with your spoon, fishing out something that could be a lentil, a pebble, or a very determined beetle. You take a bite and immediately regret asking for flavor. The taste is somewhere between earthy and what sadness would taste like if it was edible. Still, you eat, because hunger is the best seasoning, and you need the energy to survive the afternoon shift. Lunch is also prime time for gossip, a tradition as old as suffering itself. You lean in as someone whispers about Pharaoh's latest tantrum. Apparently, he threw his scepter at a servant for bringing him lukewarm wine. Maybe he should try our stew, someone mutters, earning a round of snickers. Another rumor floats by. Someone's cousin's neighbor's uncle tried to escape last week. The story changes with every telling. Sometimes he made it to the Nile. Sometimes he was caught by a crocodile. And sometimes he just tripped over his own tunic and gave up. You swap stories about the overseers too. Who's in a bad mood? Who's likely to volunteer you for extra duty? Who's secretly hoarding garlic? It's like a very low-budget episode of Survivor. Except the prize is not getting yelled at for 5 minutes. Someone tries to lighten the mood by doing impressions of the foreman. Shoulders hunched, stick waving. Voice pitched somewhere between angry goose and disappointed mother-in-law. You laugh, but keep one eye on the real foreman, who's prowling the perimeter like a cat looking for a mouse to swat. As you eat, you notice the little things. The way everyone guards their bowl, the quick glances at the sky to judge how much break time is left, the quiet prayers muttered under their breath. Lunch isn't just about food. It's about hope, camaraderie, and the fleeting illusion that you're not just cogs in Pharaoh's giant sand-filled machine. You scrape the last bit of stew from your bowl, grateful for every calorie, even if you're still not sure what you just ate. Someone offers you a crust of bread, hard as a brick, but you take it anyway. Waste not, want not. As the foreman's shadow looms, signaling the end of lunch, you sigh, stand, and dust the sand from your tunic. Back to the bricks, the sun, and the endless echoing shouts of faster. But for a few precious minutes, you were just people, sharing food, stories, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow's stew will be a little less mysterious. The sun is relentless. You try to cover your head with a rag, but it's basically a napkin. By noon, you're the color of a boiled lobster and twice as cranky. Let's talk about sun protection, ancient Egypt style, where the only thing between you and the wrath of Ra is a thin scrap of linen and a prayer that the clouds might show up for once in their lives. Spoiler, they won't. You step out onto the work site and immediately feel the sun's judgmental gaze. It's not just hot, it's bake a loaf of bread on your forehead, hot. You can practically hear your skin sizzling, and you wonder if anyone in history has ever tried to invent sunscreen using mud and wishful thinking. You tie your rag around your head, hoping for a little relief. It's the ancient equivalent of a baseball cap, except it offers about as much protection as a slice of pita bread. The wind picks up and your hat flaps in the breeze, threatening to fly off and leave you defenseless. You pull it tighter, but it's a losing battle. The sun is everywhere, on your face, your neck, your arms, even the tops of your feet if your sandals have given up, which, let's be honest, they have. By mid-morning, you can feel your skin tightening, turning a lovely shade of tomato surprise. You glance at your fellow workers and see the same story written across their faces, red, peeling, and glistening with sweat. There's no aloe vera, No after-sun lotion, just the hope that maybe tomorrow you'll tan instead of burn. You try to stay positive, but it's hard when you're pretty sure you could be used as a warning label for what not to do in the sun. The overseers, of course, are no help. They're either standing in the shade or pretending not to notice that everyone is slowly roasting. You consider asking for a break, but the last person who tried that got assigned to shade duty, which is just a fancy way of saying stand in the sun and hold a stick for someone else's shade. Ancient Egypt, where irony is alive and well. You try to distract yourself by daydreaming about cool things, ice, rivers, maybe a nice cave. Instead, you get a face full of dust and the realization that your sweat is now mixing with the mud on your skin, creating a sort of accidental body paint. You wonder if this is how mummies got started, just people who were too sunburned to move. By noon, you're officially done. Your skin is radiating heat, your lips are cracked, and you're convinced that Ra, the sun god, is personally out to get you. You're cranky, irritable, and one bad joke away from inventing the world's first sunburn support group. You look at your arms and see the beginnings of a truly impressive farmer's tan. If only anyone in ancient Egypt knew what a farmer's tan was. As the afternoon drags on, you accept your fate. There's no escape, no relief, just the knowledge that tomorrow you'll do it all over again. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, SPF stands for sunburn, Pharaoh's fine. And you're just another crispy brick in the wall. Nature calls, but privacy is a luxury for people who don't live in a labor camp. You find a quiet spot behind a half-built wall and hope the wind is blowing the right way. Let's talk about one of the most underappreciated modern luxuries, the bathroom. In Pharaoh's Egypt, there's no such thing as restroom facilities. There's no sign with a little stick figure, no line of stalls, and definitely no scented candles. When you've got to go, you've got to improvise, preferably somewhere out of sight, out of mind, and out of the direct path of the foreman. You scan the work site for a spot that offers at least a hint of dignity. The best you can do is a half-built wall, a pile of discarded bricks, or, if you're feeling adventurous, a patch of tall reeds by the riverbank. You shuffle over, trying to look casual, as if you're just inspecting the masonry. Everyone knows what you're up to, but there's an unspoken agreement not to make eye contact. Ancient Egypt, where solidarity means pretending not to notice your neighbor squatting behind a rock. The ground is hot, the air is thick, and the only thing separating you from the rest of humanity is your own sense of urgency. You do your business as quickly as possible, all the while praying that the wind is blowing away from you, not toward you. There's nothing quite like a surprise gust to remind you that humility is a virtue. Toilet paper. Dream on. The best you can hope for is a handful of sand, a smooth stone, or, if you're really lucky, a stray leaf that hasn't already been claimed. You make a mental note to thank God for modern plumbing, if you ever get to experience it. You finish up, dust yourself off, and try to rejoin the group without drawing attention. There's always the risk of stepping in something you'd rather not identify. So you tread carefully, eyes scanning the ground for suspiciously soft patches. You wonder if anyone in history has ever invented the concept of a bathroom break, or if it's just been one long, awkward shuffle since the dawn of time. Back at the worksite, you catch the eye of another laborer heading off in the same direction. You exchange a knowing nod, the universal sign for good luck, and may the flies be elsewhere. It's a small comfort, but in a world where privacy is as rare as a day off, you take what you can get. As you return to your post, you can't help but marvel at the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the shadow of the pyramids, surrounded by sand, sweat, and the ever-present risk of embarrassment, you find a way to carry on. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, the only thing more certain than the sunrise is the fact that when nature calls, you answer, no matter how undignified the setting. Every so often, Pharaoh or one of his officials stops by to motivate the workers. It's mostly threats, with a side of, remember who's in charge. You nod, smile, and quietly plot your escape. Let's set the scene. You're hunched over a pile of bricks, sweat dripping into your eyes, when suddenly the worksite hushes. There's a ripple of nervous energy, like when your boss walks by and everyone pretends to look busy, except here. The stakes are a little higher than missing out on a promotion. Pharaoh's entourage arrives in a cloud of perfume, gold, and self-importance. You can smell them before you see them, which is saying something, considering you've spent the morning marinating in your own onion-scented sweat. Pharaoh himself rarely makes an appearance. He's got pyramids to admire and eyeliner to apply, but his officials are more than happy to fill in. They strut around in their crisp linen robes, looking like they've never lifted anything heavier than a feather duster. One of them clears his throat, and you brace yourself for the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a TED Talk. Workers, he bellows. Pharaoh is very pleased with your progress, but he would be even more pleased if you worked harder, faster, and with more enthusiasm. You nod, smile, and try to look enthusiastic, which is hard when your only motivation is not getting assigned to the night shift. The official continues, remember, you are building history. You are part of something eternal. You glance at your neighbor, who is currently picking straw out of his hair and looking like he'd rather be part of something with air conditioning. The pep talk quickly devolves into a list of threats. Work faster, or else. Meet your quota, or else. Stop hiding bricks behind the wall, or else. You nod along, mentally cataloguing all the or elses. It's a motivational style that's less inspirational poster and more warning label. You wonder if anyone has ever tried to unionize, but you suspect the answer involves more bricks and fewer negotiations. As the official drones on, you let your mind wander. Maybe you could fake a fainting spell. Maybe you could sneak away during the next plague. Maybe Moses really is out there somewhere working on his "let my people go" speech. You quietly plot your escape, even though you know you'll be back here tomorrow, nodding and smiling through another round of motivational threats. The pep talk ends with a flourish. Remember, Pharaoh is watching, and the officials sweep away, leaving behind a trail of sandal prints and crushed dreams. The overseers immediately start barking orders, as if to prove they were listening. You sigh, pick up your tools, and get back to work, comforted only by the knowledge that at least you're not the one giving the pep talks. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, motivation comes in two flavors: threats and more threats. And if you're lucky, you'll survive both long enough to hear the next round. The sun gets hotter, the bricks get heavier, and your will to live gets lighter. You wonder if anyone in history has ever called in sick with pyramid fatigue. Let's be honest, if the morning shift was rough, the afternoon is where hope goes to die. The sun, which you thought couldn't possibly get any brighter, somehow cranks up the intensity. It's like Ra himself is leaning in for a closer look, just to see how much sweat a human can produce before evaporating entirely. You squint at the horizon, searching for a cloud, a breeze, or a sign from God, anything to break the monotony. Spoiler, all you get is more sun. By now, your muscles are screaming, your hands are raw, and your back feels like it's been personally cursed by Pharaoh. Each brick seems to have doubled in weight since lunch. You start to suspect that the overseers are secretly swapping out your bricks for heavier ones just to mess with you. You try to lift with your legs, but your legs have filed a formal complaint and are refusing to participate. You look around at your fellow Israelites, and everyone's moving in slow motion. The morning's chatter has faded into a symphony of groans, sighs, and the occasional muttered prayer for early retirement. Someone tries to start a work song, but it quickly devolves into a group whimper. Even the goats look exhausted, and goats are basically the crossfitters of the animal kingdom. You fantasize about calling in sick. Sorry, can't make bricks today. Caught a bad case of pyramid, fatigue, doctor's orders. But you know how that would go. The ancient Egyptian HR department is just the foreman with a bigger stick and less sympathy. The only sick day you're getting is if you actually pass out, and even then, you'll probably wake up with a brick in each hand. The worksite itself becomes a kind of fever dream. The heat shimmers off the stones, making the pyramid look like it's melting. You lose track of time, measuring your day in bricks stacked and water breaks stolen. The only thing keeping you going is the knowledge that, eventually, the sun will set and you'll get to collapse in a heap of sweat and dust. Every so often, someone tries to lighten the mood with a joke, usually about Pharaoh's hat or the latest plague rumor. But laughter is in short supply. You're too busy trying to remember what your hands felt like before they turned into calloused claws. You start to wonder if you'll ever be able to unclench your fists, or if you'll just be permanently stuck in brick-holding mode. As the afternoon drags on, you develop a new appreciation for the phrase backbreaking labor. You also develop a new appreciation for sitting, lying down, and any activity that doesn't involve lifting things. You make a mental note to invent the hammock, right after you invent the union. Finally, as the sun begins its slow descent, you feel a tiny flicker of hope. The end of the shift is in sight. You summon the last of your strength, haul one more brick, and dream of a world where the only thing you have to lift is a spoonful of stew. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, the bricks may get heavier, but your sense of humor is the only thing that keeps you from crumbling. Safety regulations? Never heard of them. You dodge falling stones, flying insults, and the occasional scorpion. Workers' comp is just try not to die. Let's talk about occupational hazards, ancient Egypt edition. Forget hard hats, steel-toed boots, or those little orange cones that make you feel like someone cares. Here, your only protection is a quick reflex and the hope that today isn't the day gravity gets creative. The construction site is a symphony of chaos, bricks teetering on the edge of collapse, ropes fraying at the worst possible moment, and the ever-present threat of a boulder deciding it's time to test your agility. You keep your head on a swivel, eyes darting between the sky for falling rocks, the ground for scorpions, and the foreman for flying insults. The foreman's tongue is sharper than any chisel on site. 1 minute he's berating you for stacking bricks too slowly, the next he's inventing new ways to question your parentage. You wonder if sarcasm is an official job requirement or just a perk of the position. The rocks, though, are no joke. Every so often, someone shouts a warning, usually too late, and everyone ducks, hoping the laws of physics are on their side. You hear the thud of stone hitting sand, followed by a collective sigh of relief, or, occasionally, a string of words that would make a camel blush. You learn to move fast, keep your head down, and never, ever stand directly under anything that looks like it might move. Ancient Egypt, where heads up is less advice and more a survival strategy. Then there are the scorpions. They don't care about your brick quota or your existential dread. They just want a warm place to hide, and your sandal is prime real estate. You feel a tickle on your ankle and do the ancient Egyptian version of the cha-cha, hoping nobody saw. Spoiler, everyone saw. But nobody laughs, because they know they're next. There's no first aid kit, no emergency exits, and definitely no days since last accident sign. If you get hurt, the best you can hope for is a sympathetic grunt and a handful of mud to slap on the wound. If you're really unlucky, you get reassigned to a job that's somehow even worse, like dung duty or official water taster, which is just a fancy way of saying guinea pig. Despite the danger, you keep working, not because you love it, but because the alternative is even less appealing. You develop a sixth sense for trouble, a knack for dodging disaster, and a deep appreciation for the simple joy of making it through the day in one piece. As the sun sets and the last brick is stacked, you take a moment to count your fingers and toes. Still all there. You survived another day of ancient Egyptian team building, where the only real safety net is your own stubbornness. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, the motto isn't safety first, it's good luck and try not to die. By late afternoon, the air is thick with the scent of sweat, onions, and something you hope is just mud. You dream of a world with soap, or at least a strong breeze. Let's talk about the olfactory experience of being an Israelite slave in Egypt. If you've ever walked into a gym locker room after a middle school dodgeball tournament, multiply that by 1,000 and add a dash of "what died in here?" That's your daily reality. The sun has been baking you and your fellow workers for hours, and the result is a communal aroma that could knock a vulture off a dung heap. The first note to hit your nose is sweat, layers and layers of it, marinated in the Egyptian sun and aged to perfection. It's not just your own either. You're shoulder to shoulder with dozens of other laborers, all glistening with the same salty sheen. Personal space is a myth, and so is deodorant. You try to breathe through your mouth, but then you remember the taste of the water jug and decide it's not worth the risk. Next comes the onions, always the onions. They're in your breakfast, your lunch, your pause, and apparently the very air itself. You start to wonder if you'll ever stop smelling like a salad. If you ever make it out of Egypt, you're going to have to warn people. Hi, I'm from the land of Pharaoh. Yes, that's onion. No, it's not contagious. And then there's the mystery scent. Is it mud? Is it something that crawled out of the Nile and gave up? Is it just the collective despair of 1,000 people who haven't had a bath since the last plague? You don't ask questions. You just hope it's not coming from you. You fantasize about soap, not the fancy, lavender-scented kind. Just anything that bubbles and doesn't double as an exfoliant. You'd settle for a strong breeze, a splash of clean water, or even a handful of mint leaves to stuff up your nose. But here, the closest thing to a spa day is standing downwind from the fish market. Every so often, someone tries to mask the smell with a sprig of herbs tucked behind their ear or a quick rinse in the Nile. It helps for about 5 seconds, until the next gust of wind brings everything right back. You make a mental note to invent perfume, right after you invent indoor plumbing and the concept of personal hygiene. By the end of the day, you're so used to the smell that you almost stop noticing it. Almost. But then the wind shifts, and you're reminded all over again that in Pharaoh's Egypt, the only thing thicker than the air is the stench. You sigh, wipe your brow, and dream of a future where the only thing you smell like after work is a hard-earned paycheck, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of hope. The workday ends when the foreman says so, usually by yelling louder. You shuffle home, every muscle aching, and wonder if anyone's invented the concept of weekend yet. There's no satisfying whistle, no triumphant bell, and definitely no 5 o'clock somewhere in Pharaoh's Egypt. The only signal that your day of brick-hauling misery is over is the foreman's voice, which somehow manages to get even shriller as the sun sets. He shouts something that sounds vaguely like enough, but could just as easily be faster. It's hard to tell when your ears are ringing from a full day of motivational screaming. You drop your last brick with a sigh that's equal parts relief and disbelief. Your hands are raw, your back is a roadmap of aches, and your feet feel like you've walked across the entire Sinai Peninsula, barefoot, uphill, both ways. You look around at your fellow Israelites, all of you moving in the same slow, shuffling procession, like a parade of extremely tired zombies. There's no high-fiving, no good job team, just a collective groan and a silent agreement to never speak of this day again. The walk home is a blur. The sand, which seemed merely inconvenient this morning, now feels like a personal insult. Every step stirs up a fresh cloud of dust, which clings to your sweaty skin and seeps into every fold of your tunic. You fantasize about collapsing into bed, but you know there are still chores waiting, fetching water, patching sandals, and maybe, if you're lucky, a quick rinse in the Nile, which is less, refreshing swim, and more ancient group bath. You pass the same landmarks you saw on your way in. The half-built wall, the stubborn goat, the pile of bricks that somehow never gets any smaller. The sun is finally dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. It would be beautiful if you weren't so tired you could cry. As you trudge along, you wonder if anyone has ever invented the concept of a weekend. A day, just one day, where you don't have to haul, stack, or mix anything. A day to rest, to stretch out, to let your blisters heal, and your brain forget the sound of the foreman's voice. You make a mental note to bring it up with Moses, right after you ask him about that whole freedom thing. By the time you reach your hut, the only thing you want is to collapse. You barely notice the smell, the noise, or the fact that you're still covered in a layer of ancient Egyptian grime. You just want to close your eyes and pretend, for a few precious hours, that tomorrow won't be exactly the same. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, quitting time isn't a celebration. It's just a pause before the next round. And the only thing more mythical than a weekend is the idea that you might actually get to sleep in. Dinner is more onions. Maybe a scrap of fish if you're lucky. But mostly just the same gruel as breakfast. You eat in silence, too tired to complain. Let's set the table, if you can call a circle in the dirt and a battered clay bowl a table. After a day of hauling bricks, dodging falling rocks, and marinating in your own sweat, you'd think you'd be rewarded with a feast. Instead, you're greeted by the familiar, pungent aroma of, you guessed it, onions. The evening meal is a culinary déjà vu. A ladle of onion porridge, maybe a wilted leek, and if the Nile was feeling generous, a sliver of fish so small you're not sure if it's protein or just a rumor. You sit shoulder to shoulder with your family and neighbors, each of you clutching your bowl like it's the Holy Grail. Conversation is minimal. The energy you might have spent on small talk was left somewhere between your third and fourth brick quota. The only sounds are the scraping of spoons and the occasional sigh of someone who just found a fish bone and is considering it a win. The gruel is lukewarm and lumpy, with the consistency of regret and the flavor profile of, at least it's not sand. You chew slowly, savoring each bite not because it's delicious, but because you're trying to make it last. Hunger is the best seasoning, but even hunger can't turn onions into a delicacy. You wonder if Pharaoh eats onions, or if he's up in his palace feasting on roast duck and honey cakes, laughing at the idea of eating anything that grows underground. If you're lucky, someone might have bartered for a handful of lentils or a scrap of dried fruit. These are passed around like treasure, each person taking a tiny bite and pretending it's enough. You think about the stories of milk and honey, and for a moment, you let yourself imagine a world where dinner is something to look forward to, not just another hurdle to survive. As the sun sets and the shadows grow long, you finish your meal and scrape the last bits from your bowl. There's no dessert, no after-dinner mint, just the lingering taste of onions and the knowledge that tomorrow's menu will look exactly the same. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, set your bowl aside, and lean back, letting exhaustion wash over you. No one complains. Complaining takes energy, and you're saving what little you have for tomorrow. Instead, you share a quiet moment with your fellow Israelites, united by hunger, hope, and the stubborn belief that someday, somehow, there will be more to life than onions. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, dinner isn't about satisfaction, it's about survival. And tonight, like every night, you survive. Evenings are for family, if you can stay awake. You swap stories, compare blisters, and try to remember what life was like before you could recite the brick quota in your sleep. After a day spent under the merciless Egyptian sun, you finally stumble back to your hut, where the air is thick with the scent of onions, dust, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, tonight, you'll get a full night's sleep. The hut is crowded, siblings, cousins, parents, and the occasional neighbor who just sort of moved in and never left. Privacy is a myth, but so is personal space, so you squeeze in and find your spot on the floor. Dinner is over, chores are done, or at least ignored until tomorrow. And now comes the best part of the day, sitting together and pretending you're not all one bad day away from turning into a pillar of salt. You stretch out your aching legs, flex your hands, and compare the day's collection of blisters. There's a certain pride in showing off the biggest one, like a badge of honor, but with more pus. Someone starts telling a story. Maybe it's your uncle, who claims he once outran a chariot. He didn't. Or your grandmother, who remembers the good old days before Pharaoh got so into construction. The stories are always a little exaggerated, but nobody minds. It's not about the facts. It's about the laughter, the distraction, and the reminder that you're more than just a cog in Pharaoh's brick machine. The kids beg for tales of miracles and heroes, Moses, Joseph, the time Aunt Miriam supposedly turned water into wine. It was just very weak grape juice, but let her have her moment. You listen, eyes half closed, letting the words wash over you like a cool breeze. For a few precious minutes, you're not a slave, not a laborer, not a number on a foreman's list. You're part of a family, a people, a story that's still being written. You share your own highlights from the day. The time you almost dropped a brick on the overseer's foot, almost. The goat that tried to eat your tunic. The moment you found a shady spot and managed to sit for a whole 5 minutes without being yelled at. The laughter is quiet, tired, but real. It's the kind of laughter that keeps you going, even when everything else feels impossible. As the night deepens, the stories slow, replaced by the soft sounds of people drifting off to sleep. Someone snores. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else is already dreaming of a world with fewer onions. You close your eyes, grateful for these small moments, these scraps of normalcy in a life that's anything but. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, Family time isn't just a luxury, it's survival. It's the glue that holds you together when everything else is falling apart. And as you drift off, surrounded by the people you love and their questionable hygiene, you remember, no matter how hard the day, you're never facing it alone. There's no Netflix, just the night sky and the gentle scratching of lice. You count stars, scratch, and try to ignore the distant sound of someone snoring like a dying camel. Let's talk about winding down in ancient Egypt, where evening entertainment is less about binge-watching and more about survival skills. After dinner, you shuffle outside your hut, stretch your aching limbs, and collapse onto your mat, which is only slightly less lumpy than the ground itself. There's no soft glow of a TV, no soothing playlist, just the vast, endless sky and the realization that you're about to spend another night in the world's least glamorous sleepover. The stars are incredible, though. With no city lights to drown them out, the heavens are ablaze with more twinkling dots than you can count. You try anyway, partly for distraction, and partly because it's the only thing you can do lying flat on your back. You spot familiar constellations, maybe a camel, maybe a brick, maybe just your imagination running wild from exhaustion. You make a game of it. That one's Pharaoh's hat. That one's the Great Onion Nebula. But the real nighttime companions aren't celestial. They're crawling. Lice, the ancient world's most loyal pets, make their presence known as soon as you settle in. You scratch your scalp, then your arms, then your legs, and then you try to convince yourself it's just your imagination. It's not. Everyone's doing the same little dance, a nightly ritual that's equal parts hygiene and futility. You wonder if anyone has ever invented a shampoo that actually works, or if you're doomed to be itchy until the end of time. The soundtrack to your evening is a medley of snores, coughs, and the occasional groan from someone rolling over onto a fresh bruise. There's always one person who snores so loudly, you're convinced they're auditioning for a new plague. You try to tune it out, but it's like sleeping next to a dying camel with a sinus infection. You make a mental note to claim a spot farther away tomorrow, knowing full well you'll forget by morning. If you're lucky, someone might tell a story, maybe a tale of the old country, or a whispered rumor about Moses and his mysterious staff. The stories are comforting, even if you've heard them 100 times. They remind you that you're not alone, that everyone else is just as tired, itchy, and hopeful as you are. Eventually, your eyelids grow heavy. You scratch one last time, pull your ragged blanket up to your chin, and let the stars blur into a soft, shimmering haze. You drift off, comforted by the knowledge that, for all its discomforts, the night is at least a break from bricks, sunburn, and the endless yelling of the foreman. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, bedtime isn't about luxury. It's about making it through another day, one star, one scratch, and one snore at a time. Before sleep, you whisper prayers for deliverance. Rumors swirl about a guy named Moses, who's got a plan. You hope he's better at logistics than Pharaoh. Night in the labor camp is a strange kind of quiet. The air is cooler, the stars are out, and for a few precious moments, the only thing you have to lift is your own hope. You lie on your mat, staring up at the patchwork ceiling, listening to the soft chorus of snores, whispered prayers, and the occasional complaint about someone's feet being in the wrong place. It's the only time all day when your mind is free to wander, away from bricks, away from blisters, and towards something that almost feels like possibility. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. There's a man, Moses, son of Amram, raised in Pharaoh's palace, now apparently moonlighting as a revolutionary. Some say he's got a direct line to God. Others say he's just really good at public speaking. Either way, the rumors are spreading faster than a plague of frogs. They say he's demanding freedom for your people. They say he's not afraid of Pharaoh. They say he's got a staff that turns into a snake, which frankly sounds like a party trick that could go either way. You let yourself imagine it. A life without quotas, without whips, without the taste of onions haunting your every meal. A land flowing with milk and honey, whatever that means. You'd settle for a land flowing with clean water and maybe a little garlic, just for variety. You picture your family walking free, your children growing up without learning to count by bricks, your evenings spent telling stories that don't end with, "And then the foreman yelled at me again." But hope is a dangerous thing in Pharaoh's Egypt. You keep your dreams small, your prayers quiet, and your expectations somewhere between miracle and maybe tomorrow. You wonder if Moses really can pull this off. You hope he's got a plan, a map, and a backup plan for when the map inevitably gets lost in the desert. You hope God is listening and that he's got a few more miracles up his sleeve. As you drift towards sleep, you whisper the same prayer you've whispered every night. "Deliver us, Lord. Remember us. Don't let us be forgotten in the shadow of these stones." You close your eyes and let the stories swirl of plagues and promises, of freedom and faith, of a tomorrow that might finally be different. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, dreams are the only thing they can't take from you. And tonight, as you drift off, you hold tight to yours, Moses, miracles, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow is the day everything changes. Just when you think things can't get any worse, here come the plagues. Frogs in your bed, locusts in your soup, and a general sense that God has a very creative sense of humor. Let's be honest. You thought you'd hit rock bottom after the third day of onion porridge and sunburns that could double as warning labels. But then, as if on cue, the universe decides to show you what worse really looks like. It starts subtly, a weird croak in the night, a few more flies than usual, maybe a river that suddenly looks a little redder than you remember. You chalk it up to exhaustion until you wake up one morning and realize you're sharing your bed with a family of frogs. Not the cute storybook kind, the slimy, judgmental kind that stare at you like you're the one who doesn't belong. You try to shoo them away, but they're everywhere, under your mat, in your shoes, even in your breakfast bowl. You wonder if this is some kind of cosmic prank, but the joke's on you, because the frogs are just the opening act. Next come the gnats, the flies, and the lice. Yes, more lice. Because apparently the ones you already had weren't enough. You scratch, you swat, you sigh, and you start to suspect that God is running out of patience and getting very, very creative. Then there are the locusts. You've never seen so many bugs in your life. They descend like a biblical cloud, eating everything in sight, including somehow your last nerve. You try to eat your lunch, but it's hard to enjoy onion stew when it's garnished with extra protein. You look at your neighbor, who's picking wings out of his teeth, and you both agree. This is officially the worst potluck ever. The plagues don't stop there. The river turns to blood. The livestock start dropping like flies, which, by the way, are still everywhere. And boils break out on everyone who's not already covered in blisters. You start to lose track of which disaster is which. Is it hail, or just another day of falling rocks? Is that darkness, or are you just passing out from exhaustion? You try to keep your sense of humor, but even sarcasm has its limits when you're knee-deep in frogs. The Egyptians are freaking out. The overseers are crankier than ever. And Pharaoh is having daily meltdowns that make your foreman look like a motivational speaker. You overhear rumors that Moses is behind all this, and you start to root for him, if only because you'd like to go one day without finding a frog in your sandal. Through it all, you cling to the hope that maybe, just maybe, deliverance is on the horizon. Until then, you keep your mouth closed, your shoes checked, and your prayers ready. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, just when you think things can't get any worse, God proves you wrong, with style. You and your friends share secret glances and whispered jokes about Pharaoh's hat. Maybe you hide a brick, maybe you work a little slower. It's not much, but it's something. In Pharaoh's Egypt, open rebellion is a one-way ticket to a very short career and an even shorter life. But that doesn't mean you just accept your fate without a fight. No, your resistance is quieter, subtler, and honestly, a little bit petty. But in a world where every day is a test of endurance, even the smallest act of defiance feels like a victory. It starts with the jokes. You and your friends have a running commentary about Pharaoh's fashion choices, his eyeliner, his elaborate headdresses, the way he struts around like he invented the sun. You keep your voices low, your laughter muffled, but the humor is sharp and shared. It's a reminder that no matter how much power Pharaoh has, he can't control your sense of irony. Then there are the lost bricks. Maybe one slips into the mud pit. Maybe another gets buried at the bottom of a pile, never to see the light of day. It's not enough to slow the project, but it's enough to make you feel like you're not just a cog in the machine. Every hidden brick is a tiny, silent protest, a way of saying, you don't own all of me. Sometimes you work just a little slower. You take an extra moment to tie your sandal, to wipe the sweat from your brow, to accidentally drop your trowel and have to pick it up again. The overseers bark and threaten, but you know the limits. You know how to blend in, how to look busy while quietly reclaiming a sliver of your own time. You share food when you can, slipping an extra bite of onion or a scrap of bread to someone who needs it more. You help each other with chores, cover for a friend who needs a moment to rest, or whisper encouragement when the day feels endless. These aren't grand gestures, but they're acts of solidarity. Tiny rebellions against a system designed to keep you isolated and afraid. At night, you gather in the shadows, swapping stories of small victories. Someone managed to sneak a joke past the foreman. Someone else hid 3 bricks in one day. You celebrate these moments, no matter how small, because they remind you that you're still human, still capable of choice, still part of something bigger than Pharaoh's empire. You know you can't topple the pyramids with a single act, but every joke, every hidden brick, every shared glance is a crack in the foundation of oppression. It's not much, but it's something. And in Pharaoh's Egypt, sometimes something is all you need to keep hope alive. Despite everything, you cling to faith. You remember the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and hope that God hasn't forgotten you in the shadow of the pyramids. After a day spent dodging bricks, insults, and the occasional plague, it would be easy to let despair settle in for good. But somehow, you don't. Maybe it's stubbornness, maybe it's tradition, or maybe it's something deeper. A thread of hope that's been woven through your people's story since the very beginning. At night, when the camp is quiet and the stars are bright above the endless sand, you find yourself whispering the old names. Abraham, who left everything behind to follow a promise. Isaac, who learned that sometimes faith means trusting even when the knife is raised. Jacob, who wrestled with angels and limped away with a blessing. Their stories are your inheritance, handed down from parent to child, told in hushed voices around smoky lamps and over bowls of lentil stew. You remember the covenant, the promise that your people would be as numerous as the stars, that you would have a land of your own, that you would be a blessing to the world. It's hard to see how any of that could be true when your hands are raw from making bricks and your back aches from carrying burdens that aren't yours. But faith isn't about what you see. It's about what you hold on to when there's nothing else left. Some nights, you catch your mother murmuring prayers, her lips moving silently as she asks God to remember his people. You see your father tracing invisible letters in the dust, spelling out the names of ancestors who walked through deserts and crossed rivers, who faced famine and fear and still believed. You hear the children reciting the Shema, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Their voices small but determined, a chorus of hope in the darkness. Even the plagues, as terrifying as they are, feel like a sign that maybe, just maybe, God is still paying attention. Maybe he hasn't forgotten you after all. Maybe deliverance is coming, even if it's taking longer than you'd like. So you hold on. You tell the stories. You sing the old songs, even if your voice is hoarse and your heart is heavy. You light a lamp, share a crust of bread, and remind each other that you are not alone. Not now, not ever. Because faith is the fire that keeps you warm when the night is cold, the light that guides you when the path is hidden, the hope that endures when everything else falls away. In the shadow of the pyramids, surrounded by suffering and uncertainty, you choose to believe. You choose to hope. And in that choice, you find the strength to face another day. One night, everything changes. There's chaos, confusion, and the unmistakable feeling that history is about to be made. You grab what you can and run for your life. It starts as a whisper, a rumor that spreads faster than a plague of locusts. Tonight is the night. You hear it in the hush of your neighbor's voice, see it in the frantic packing of your mother's hands, feel it in the pounding of your own heart. For generations you've dreamed of freedom, but now that it's here, it feels unreal, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. The air is thick with tension. All around you, families are gathering their meager possessions. A battered bowl, a scrap of bread, a child's ragged blanket. There's no time to say goodbye to the life you've always known. No time to mourn the home you're about to leave behind. You move on instinct, grabbing what you can carry and holding tight to the hands of those you love. Outside, the night is alive with noise. Shouts, cries, the distant wailing of Egyptians who have finally had enough of plagues and loss. You see torches flickering in the darkness, shadows darting between huts, and the unmistakable figure of Moses, staff in hand, leading the way. He's calm, determined, and somehow larger than life. You cling to his presence like a lifeline, trusting that he knows the way out. The streets are chaos. People pour out of their homes, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. Children cry, goats bleat, and the air is filled with the sound of hurried footsteps on packed earth. You hear the command, "Go, now," and you don't look back. There's no time for second thoughts, no time for fear. You run. As you move through the city, you realize you're not alone. Thousands of your people are with you, all moving as one, united by hope, desperation, and the promise of something better. The moon hangs overhead, casting everything in silver and shadow. You catch glimpses of familiar faces, friends, neighbors, even the foreman who once yelled at you, now just another figure in the fleeing crowd. You reach the edge of the city, breathless and shaking. Behind you, Egypt is in turmoil. Ahead, the unknown stretches out like a blank page. For the first time in your life, you're not sure what tomorrow will bring. But for the first time, you get to choose. You keep moving, step after step, into the darkness and toward the promise of freedom. The past clings to you like dust, but the future calls louder. Tonight, you are more than a slave, more than a brickmaker, more than a number in Pharaoh's ledger. Tonight, you are part of a story that will be told for generations, a story of courage, faith, and the night when everything changed. Because in Pharaoh's Egypt, hope was a whisper. But tonight, hope is a shout, echoing through the desert, leading you forward, one trembling, unstoppable step at a time. As you leave Egypt behind, you look back at the pyramids, monuments to suffering, survival, and the world's worst summer job. You're free, but you'll never forget the smell of onions. The day you finally walk away from Egypt, the air feels different, lighter somehow. The Nile glimmers in the distance, and the sun, for once, seems to shine on your face instead of beating down on your back. You join the endless line of your people, shuffling forward with everything you own tied in bundles, children clinging to your hands, and hope swelling in your chest. The pyramids loom behind you, massive and unyielding, casting long shadows over the desert sand. You pause for a moment, turning to look back. For years, those stones were your world, your prison, your proving ground, your daily torment. Each block is a memory. The sting of the whip, the ache in your muscles, the taste of sweat and dust, and always onions. You remember the endless days, the endless bricks, the endless yelling. You remember the jokes whispered behind the foreman's back, the secret acts of rebellion, the prayers muttered in the darkness. You remember the plagues, frogs in your bed, locusts in your soup, and the strange, wild hope that maybe, just maybe, God was listening. Now, as you stand on the threshold of freedom, the pyramids look different. They're still enormous, still awe-inspiring, but now you see them for what they really are. Monuments to survival. Proof that you endured, that you outlasted Pharaoh's cruelty, that you are more than the sum of your suffering. You realize that every stone you laid is a testament, not just to Pharaoh's ego, but to your people's resilience, humor, and faith. You take a deep breath, and for the first time, it doesn't taste like dust and despair. The smell of onions still lingers, stubborn as ever. But now, it's just a memory, a reminder of where you've been, not where you're going. You know you'll never forget it. You'll never forget the friends you made, the family you clung to, the stories you told to keep hope alive. You'll never forget the way you learned to laugh, even when there was nothing funny, or the way you learned to dream, even when the world told you not to. As the line moves forward, you turn your back on the pyramids and face the unknown. There's fear, yes, but also freedom. There's uncertainty, but also promise. You walk on step by step, carrying the weight of your past but no longer defined by it. Because in the end, the pyramids are just stones. You're a survivor. And as you disappear into the desert, you know that whatever comes next, you'll face it together, free at last, and ready to write a new story.